Since childhood, Dr. Roger Lear has had an interest in the subject of aliens and UFOs, but what Dr. Lear did not know was that the interest, later in life, would develop into scientific research, followed by millions around the planet and possibly other planets too.
I'm Dr. Roger Lear, and I've been doing research in the alien abduction phenomena regarding physical evidence aspects of the phenomena. Well, I've always had an interest in UFOs and certainly alien life forms since I was a young man. And in 1947, remember quite clearly my father bringing in a newspaper into our kitchen at home and laying it on the table and then emphasizing the headline to my mother that read U.S. Army Air Force captures flying saucer. And he went on with that with an oration explaining that we certainly couldn't be the only intelligent life in the universe. And he was very dismayed with the following headline in the next few days, which said that it was not a flying saucer and that it was a balloon. And he was one of these people who, if you were an engineer of some sort, then you better know everything about engineering. And in other words, if the Air Force was the epitome of knowledge in reference to anything that was flying, he was absolutely insulted that they would try and pass off to the public that they didn't know the difference between a flying saucer and a balloon.
Dr. Lear is onto 100% of the truth. He performs very, very useful work in the world today. And basically, if his work wasn't valid, he wouldn't have the objects to prove that people were unflattered. He's really onto something. He's a great patriot as well.
Myself and my surgical team has performed 10 surgeries for removal of objects from individuals who allege alien abduction. We have submitted these surgery specimens for both biological and metallurgical analysis, and then we have presented this material to the public. Well, the testing that we did on these objects was two different kinds of testing. One was biological and the other was metallurgical. At first we were only able to afford to do the biological testing, and we found some very unusual results. First of all, the original objects that we removed were metallic rods that were covered with a very strange dark gray biological membrane. And this membrane surrounded the metal within in such a tight form and was so very dark and gray and smooth and well organized that it was impossible to believe that this was something that was just put there by the body. Now, of course, I had removed things many times before and had never seen anything like this. The other unusual thing we found was that in the living state, we could not cut these entities open with a surgical blade, and surgical blades are very sharp. This is a case of 2 implants in the big toe. The lady lives in Brazil. These implants are still in the toe. They have not been removed. And this is very similar to a case that we did in August of 1995. 2 objects. One of the other most interesting portions of the biological results, besides the fact that there was absolutely no inflammatory response, was that the area contained a large amount of nerve cells, very specialized nerve cells called proprioceptors. And these were certainly not anatomically correct for that area of the anatomy. Between the fact that there was no inflammatory response and the fact that there was a large number of nerve cells, proved to be a very, very interesting finding. And these were the findings that we took to the National Institute for Discovery Science. And because of the biological findings and other findings, for example, there was no scar. There was no noted portal of entry of where these objects went in at. They then took the ball and offered to do the first set of metallurgical diagnostic procedures. Okay, these two little objects came out of the knee of a Marine, and he said they came to the surface of the skin, and then he went in and had them surgically removed, and they gave them to him. The metallurgical tests done by some very, very famous laboratories such as New Mexico Tech and Los Alamos National Labs showed us that primarily was a comparison of these specimens to meteorite samples. Now you have to remember that the laboratories were not told what the origin of these specimens were, whether they were from the bottom of the ocean, from outer space, or from the back of a camel. So they were telling us best as to what they thought they compared to. And of course, as far as meteorites that were concerned, they pointed out that the nickel-iron ratio in our samples did not match that of the nickel-iron ratio found in meteorites.
Is this similar to the last piece you showed us?
Yes, these are all in the metallurgical category, and these are small rods, again wrapped with this very strange membrane. This came out of the back of a hand.
What else can you tell us about this piece?
This piece is similar metallurgy as to the other specimens. Contains a large amount of iron and nickel and has isotopic ratios that are not of this earth. I have my own personal opinion. I think that these are genetic monitoring devices, and I believe that there is a signal which is both going in and coming out. And I also believe that the human race is now and has been undergoing for some years a genetic manipulation, and that the children born within the last, let's say, 40, 50 years are not the same human beings that were born prior to that. These are two specimens which were removed during a surgical procedure, and they were both encapsulated in a very dark gray membrane, which you could not cut through with a surgical blade. A laboratory was not told that they were surgical specimens. They have been likened to meteorite samples. This was an object that was removed in 1999 on the NBC program Confirmation. This is an object right close to the bone here in the hand, top of the hand.
I got up as if I was awake sleepwalking. And I went outside the house and into a field next to the farmhouse. It's freshly plowed sweet potato field. And this sphere came down. There was lights moving around in the sky. And this little sphere came down and landed right in front of me in a furrow.
This one to be completely separate.
And it started to spin. And at that point, I got real scared. And I turned to run to the right, and it exploded. That's what I think happened, it exploded. And after that, I woke up.
Right here. Like I'm touching now?
I feel it. You just rolled over.
Okay. So it's a double record right here. So you want on this side of it.
Where?
Right, we're dropping it.
Want anesthesia there?
Yeah. In the V.
Okay.
Little pinprick.
What do you feel?
Where's the impact?
It was right here.
Okay, we're making an initial incision on the top surface of the hand, just opening the skin. You know what we could do is we could rotate this around so that this arm is up
Can
here.
you do that? Okay. Do that. You ready?
Well, wait. He'll have to move his hand.
That's right about that.
Might be deeper.
Yeah, that's it. That's probably it. No easy ones. That's it. That's it. It looks like it. That looks like it. No, no.
The physical contact was.
Mm-hmm.
There it is.
Got it. Okay. It wasn't underneath the skin. It's next to the bone. Okay. Now let's see what it is.
It's single piece, seed-like.
Brand alpha.
It's got a lot of tissue attached to it.
It runs
4 millimeters in length by about 2 millimeters.
After removing the implants from the patients, Dr. Lear pushes his research forward by conducting metallurgical tests to understand what materials the specimens are composed of.
Why would aliens put implants into human beings is a question I've been asked many times. Why not? We do it. We do it with lesser life forms, and we do it continuously. And obviously, at least our objective is to learn more about the life form that we're studying. Perhaps theirs is the same. Hi!
How are you, Dr. Lear?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hi,
Dr. Lear.
How are you? What's your little present?
Thank you very much. Let's see what we can find for you.
Okay.
We have a sample here which Dr. Lear has brought with him today, and it's mounted on an aluminum stub. There's a small black piece of sample that you can see on the aluminum stub. We're going to take that stub without disturbing it and mount it onto our own stub, which will go in the scanning electron microscope. Larry's going to take the mounted sample now into the vacuum chamber of the scanning electron microscope, and he's opening the door, and he will mount the sample on the stage holder. Once that is done, the door is closed, and we evacuate the chamber for...
What do you hope to find today?
We hope to find out what the basic elements that compose the metal portion of this sample are. Can you make a statement as to, if we're looking at three-dimensionally, it seems to rise in the center and slope on the sides?
It has a very unique shape at this point, that's all we can see.
This seems to be very similar with the results of some of the other similar tests that we've run on the other specimens. What we're about to do now is to find out a lot more information about what's in this specimen. This is the important stuff coming up.
The EDX analysis is done to look at the elemental composition of the sample.
Knowing what the basic elements are, why is that going to be helpful for you?
It'll be helpful in the steps that are necessary to find out sort of what makes the sample tick. We have to know what the basic elements are in order to go to the next phase of testing.
Okay, what we are seeing on the spectrum is there are 3 peaks for iron, which are labeled as Fe. There's a peak for phosphorus labeled as P. Oxygen is labeled as O. Silicon is Si. Sulfur is S. Calcium is Ca. Vanadium is V. Chromium is Cr. Manganese is Mn. And carbon is C. Those are elemental symbols for these elements, so you don't need to write the entire element. Looking at the ratios of these peaks, one can tell the highest amount. Obviously, as you can see in the spectrum, iron is the highest amount.
The test we did today was very exciting because number one was the first step in the metallurgical examinations. This was the first thing that we've ever had done to look at the metal. So I feel that what was done today was the preliminary analysis, which gave us a breakdown of the elements, and that is the place to start.
Returning to the operating room, Dr. Lear attempts to remove another implant from a self-claimed alien abductee.
Well, we've got a fluoroscan unit. This is a unit which has a television monitor, and it's we're basically able to see through the body with an image. And this next case we're going to do where we have a foreign body in the jaw, we will be able to visualize it and look for it at the same time. And what we plan to do is, and once the anesthetic is in, we're going to insert a needle and try and place the tip of the needle at the area where the foreign object lies, and then follow that as an approach.
Okay, Coleman sliding, sort of like research.
You got that green light on, Bert?
Yeah.
Okay.
Relax, Dave.
Attaboy. Deep breath. There you go. Now, part of this is going to cover your face. I haven't smothered anybody yet doing this, and you won't be the first. Okay.
That way you won't have to smile.
And then it starts to itch. Everything itches after you put sterile drapes on it. My job is to
Isn't this a lot of stuff just to get shaved?
Yeah, turn your face towards me. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some numbing medication in here, just a little skin crack and some burning, just as if you were at the dentist.
Dave.
Now the area has been prepped and draped. Now we're going to administer a local anesthetic.
Okay, Dave? And you okay, Dave? And I'm going to turn the camera on a second, okay?
Now we're placing the camera over the area so that we can visualize the object. Okay, we're making an initial incision into the skin. And now we're installing a small retractor which will hold the superficial portions of the wound apart.
What do you need?
Should have a couple of more clamps or a
Yeah.
malice or something to
Yeah.
when we get down there.
Want a couple more mosquitoes?
Yeah.
Mosquitoes, yeah.
Feel something, Dave?
Okay. Let's get the... That's a straw.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get the skin in there.
Okay.
We can probably take that off.
Yeah.
Describe some of these floors.
Well, there really isn't too much to describe at this point because we're still looking for it. And even with the best equipment in the world, it takes a while. We're using the fluoroscan again to take another look.
Can you get JR in here a second? We need to
Now,
reset
can
the
we
machine.
go like this?
Yeah.
You okay? What's the matter?
Okay, relax, Dave. Relax. Relax.
Okay. You're doing very well, Dave.
And try and visualize it while we got this in there.
How you doing, Dave?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Come out. Please come out. Come out, come out, come out, come out, come out.
How you doing, Dave?
That's starting to feel really numb now. Good.
That's the way it's supposed to be, as the book says. Oh.
Maybe. You did fine.
Yeah, really good. Really good.
You did very well.
Okay. What happened to the specimen?
Daryl took it.
Uh-huh.
Triangular piece of metal. Triangle piece of metal embedded in fat tissue. Or looks like fat tissue. Probably about
Oh, we'll get it in the other room. We'll take a better look.
Looks like it goes through the membrane.
Yeah, you can see through the
Almost
membrane.
like X-ray. If I put that other infrared lens on there, it would look even different.
Dr. Lear continues his research by taking the surgically removed specimens to be biologically tested.
I am enthusiastic and I will persist in pursuing this because of a metallic object covered with some type of a organic membrane which shows absolutely no reaction by the body was found in the body of a possible abductee with no scar. And this alone gives me enough evidence to continue to pursue this case. Hello, Irene.
Hello, Dr.
Good to know you.
Nice to meeting you.
Good
It's a
to meet
pleasure to see you
Yes,
here.
I brought you a little present.
All right, great, thank you.
You have a look at that for me?
Yeah, we will.
We're now breaking the seal and opening the specimen container, that is.
Why is it important to document every time you open it and close it?
Well, what we're trying to do is to preserve what we call a chain of evidence. Ones that sign the paper. Here's the glob. Belong in there.
Yeah. Can you hold it down a little so I can see in there?
The atomic force microscope is an instrument which can give you some data about the topography of your sample in 3 dimensions with a very high resolution. Depending on the material you are looking at, you can get atomic resolution. What is beautiful for biology is that it works in the liquid. So that's very interesting, especially when you compare with techniques like electron microscopy, where you get very high resolution, but you need to dehydrate your sample, and you need also to coat very often your sample, or freeze your sample, or dye your sample. Here with an atomic force microscope, again, you get very high resolution in 3 dimensions, and you don't need to stain or coat or freeze your sample.
So what is the experiment you're doing right now?
Which we get a little piece of this material, and we are going to let it dry in air and see if the material change in structure, stiffness, hardness, or whatever. We're going to see if you can see any change.
Well, there are a number of popular theories as to what implants might be used for. For example, some think they could be tracking devices. Others think they might be behavior modification devices. Some think they could be chemical detection devices for what chemicals in our environment accumulate within the body.
It's quite bubbly down in there, and I don't know what that is. You might be interested to see it.
Back in the serum.
Why don't you take a look at it first?
Does it look like it has more color?
No. You're a little bit higher mag. Why don't you turn the mag down a little bit and try and get it? We had the object in water, and we're concerned that something is happening to degrade the membrane. And it looks like some bubbles appeared where the object was covered in water, and so we've taken some micrographs just at low magnification. It's 63x. So these micrographs are 63x, and there's a bunch of bubbles that have formed. And Dr. Lear claims that these things don't exist when this object is covered in serum. So then we replaced the serum, or we replaced the water that it was in with serum, and now we're trying to take a time lapse of that as time goes on to see what happens to the material.
And if it is indeed human tissue, would it get hard, or would it stay soft, or what would it do?
It will stay soft pretty much. We'll see that it's not as wet, of course, but it should stay soft, yeah, squishy a bit. What are these colors?
Wasn't there before.
They weren't there?
No.
Well,
did you look at it like this?
Well, actually, we didn't look at these.
So, have you seen this kind of a pattern with any other kind of material? Is this an unusual pattern, a common pattern?
In biology, I've never seen really this kind of pattern. I would guess that people who work on material science can see this kind of structure on some metal, maybe. But in biology, I've never really seen anything like that. Never.
So this is the next one in the sequence. Just zoomed in on this area right here, showing the bubbles. See that? Okay, then the next one is where we replace the water with serum. It looks like this. So I'm going to lay these two next to each other. This one's at slightly higher magnification, so it's not a one-to-one comparison. Or not electromagnet, strong ferromagnet. In fact, they don't get much stronger than this. This is a neodymium iron borite. If that thing's ferromagnetic at all, ferromagnetic, it will move. Let me zoom.
So it's on.
Let's see, there's my magnet. So you can see it move. Whoops.
Oh, wow.
I pulled it off completely. What's that? So I pulled it off completely, off of the epoxy. That was a mistake. Probably.
We used two different types of lights to film the object in a laboratory setting. One was ultraviolet, the other infrared, and we also used a magnet to see what effect the magnet had on the object. When we used the infrared, we were able to see through the membrane, and you could see the metallic rod that was inside. That was very interesting. And of course the magnetic effect was most interesting because the object, let's say, flew or rose about over 1.5 inches to the magnet. And then in another experiment we moved the magnet gently over the object, and we saw two little what appeared to be pseudopods, or two little extensions of the membrane come out of one end of it.
So now I'm going to focus back down on the little object. And I'm going to move this thing around using the magnet, okay? So there it is. Do that. Okay, you see I'm pulling it there, it's stuck. Okay?
Well, I think the things that we found today were most interesting, and the fact that we have never seen this before, and the use of the atomic force microscope has never been done before. So getting a look at the surface architecture of this membrane is very interesting.
It's a little piece of the gray tissue, and here's where I cut it out of. And now if you touch these bags, or if you touch this, the little bubbles kind of come free.
Yeah, it looks like a bag, really.
Yeah, it looks like a little bag of eggs.
You know, again, if I press here, it's soft, and it doesn't stick so well on the surface. This one is just sticking, and it's hard.
Okay. And is this something you typically find in a human body? Like, is this typical or atypical, or?
I've never seen that, but yeah, I've never seen that before.
In like human tissue, you've never seen a human tissue that is soft and then.
I've never seen a human tissue which would get hard so fast and turn into this resin-like material. Really.
How do you explain it?
As to whether it's human or not, if this is the same as the other ones, it is composed of human tissue in combination, which is rather strange.
Okay, so you think this might be human tissue on the outside and then a metal rod on the inside, or you don't think that?
It's some tissue which is using constituents of the human body covering a metallic rod that is inside.
Yeah, you know, a logic explanation would be that it's not human tissue, of course, but I guess it's a very quick conclusion, and I think it's too early to really say that, but...
What would you think if it wasn't human tissue? Would you think it was a resin, a non-biological material? Is that what you were saying? Or?
Right, yeah. Or something very new, or that we don't know. At least I don't know.
Should we be concerned about the things that I have found? Yes, I think we should be concerned, but I don't think that we should be alarmed. Most probably this has been going on for thousands of years. We're going to perform a surgery today, which is the 9th in a series of surgeries for removal of objects from individuals who believe that they have been abducted by aliens.
I feel confident, and I also feel honored that God has put me in this place to help with this mystery. And I feel confident and I'm enamored by the group that is here doing what they're doing to try to help resolve matters as they may be.
And what made you decide that this case was worthy of your pursuing and arranging to have a surgery and all that?
This case I felt was worthy pursuing because of the nature of the statements that he had communicated to me over a year ago. I was convinced that number two, he was a compliant individual because he followed my direction. He had x-rays taken upon my request and then sent them to me. They were reviewed by a radiologist who verified the fact that there was an obvious metallic foreign body in his left arm.
You are Tim's wife.
Right.
Right. And do you work?
I'm a registered nurse.
Okay, great. So what do you think of all this?
I don't know quite what to think of all of this. It's been pretty amazing. I guess it hasn't gone away, and we're here, and now I'm anxious to find out the analysis of exactly what it is.
How did you feel when Tim told you that he decided that he wanted to maybe get this implant removed?
And come out here to California. I was skeptical. I was thought it would go away on its own and didn't really focus a lot on it, but Tim was.
All right, could you please describe the evening, that evening, what happened?
Oh, I was coming home from a medical checkup in Denver with my wife, and coming back into Yuma and coming up Highway 59, and it was kind of felt a little strange to me. And then when we did encounter the UFO and spotted it, and the events of the night started to happen, it was an awesome realization to me to realize that we were not alone in the universe, that there was other intelligent life out here besides humankind.
Tell me about your experience that night and what you guys have gone through with this. From your point of view, what did you
Oh, okay. Well, I saw this spherical shape, lights, many lights, and it was large, came right in front of our car and went, I believe, under some electrical wires and over a hill, and I experienced fear. I was afraid Tim was maneuvering the car forward and backward and trying to get a better look at it, and I was fearful that he was going to go there.
Are you eager to find out what's in it? Like, tell me about your feelings about that. Like, what's...
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm eager to see what develops and how things and what else happens, and as we go on, and what kind of questions and what kind of answers can be raised, and what solutions we have and what questions are to be had. I mean, it's to say it ain't exciting is be pretty naive. It is, you know. I'm anxious.
What do you think that object was?
It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. It wasn't an airplane. It wasn't a helicopter. It was something not of this world that I've seen. Yeah, I believe it was a UFO.
What led me to get this done? The good Lord led me here to get this done. There is no ands, ifs, or buts to it.
Are you pretty much vested to the idea that this is going to be an alien implant, or are you being objective until you see things, and what's your stand on it?
My objectivity is rooted in the fact that I've had a scientific background for over 40 years, and I don't really have any opinion of what this might be, only a suspicion, so it will have to wait until we see what we actually remove.
Great, thank you. How about Tim? Has he been having ongoing experiences that he tells you about? Tell me
Yeah, he tells me I was with him. One time our daughter was driving, and the strobe lights, you know, I don't really have a vivid memory of that. And then in 1980, He said he was in the same area. I think I remember him telling me about it, but I wasn't with him at that time.
So basically your husband's had a lot of experiences, close encounter experiences since this happened then.
I would say so.
So Dr. Lear is saying it's time for him now.
I think it looks like a little tag on it. Little tail.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And of course here it comes to a point.
Can you describe some of the unique equipment you'll be using today? Anything special?
Unique equipment used today will be a C-arm, which is an X-ray device that allows the surgical team to look at the object in the body while removing it, and the image appears on a television screen. This shortens the time of the surgery down and makes it very accurate with less interference with the surrounding tissues. Also, we've used a couple of sophisticated pieces of equipment to look for electromagnetic fields or any eminences that this object may be putting out.
Got it? Yeah, we got another one. We'll make a small incision right here, not a big one. Did it hurt you?
No.
I didn't think it would hurt at all.
It's just a thought, Doc. It's just a thought.
Small thing.
You still don't have a picture?
Got it. Oh, picture for the back room?
Yeah,
I guess
the waiting
not.
room.
Jeff? No, what? You hurt?
No, just a lot of pressure right here.
Shoulder, huh?
Yeah, right in there.
We're going to cure you.
Feels like I've been slugged.
Your arm's been hanging out there too long as it is.
Well, that bothers me anyway.
Great patient, I'll tell you. You're doing super.
We're still looking through the tissues and trying to get a good grasp on the object to remove it. And it's a little trickier than it may seem. People in the waiting room disappointed.
Are you hitting the metal there?
Maybe they could walk in one at a time.
Do you get a hold of it?
No, I don't yet.
Yeah, take a seat. The object is now
black.
believed close to the surface of the skin. It appears black in color with possibly a similar type of membrane wrapped around it.
Raj, move that piece of gauze a little bit, please. Thank you.
You see it right there? So you can just begin to see it. So I'll just pull it out. You can see it sticking out now. You don't know what it is, so we'll see. Here it is, here. So let's put in a piece of white gauze.
Can you get a little bit of the tissues that were around it out so we can send it in?
Well, I got some with it. There's a little bit of tissue with it. And that, I think that's it because...
Oh, well, I can donate a little more for a good cause.
Does that look unusual, the objects that you normally remove?
This looks very similar to what we have removed in the past.
So they got the hair standing up on your neck, Doc?
Just about.
I don't
Okay, that's
know
all I
if
wanted
get
to know.
tissue around it or not when I get some more stuff. I don't think I can be guaranteed that I have
if we can get within the vicinity of it, we can say that there's either an inflammatory response to the surrounding tissue or not.
Yeah, I don't think there will be. I think there's very little inflammation around this. It's pretty organized. I'll send some piece of tissue out with you. I don't think you're sterile, so I'm going to give you a second. I'll give you this whole thing.
Looks like a boy to me.
The two other little pieces I want separate.
Can I get it there with
container. They can go in formal.
Roger, can I get around with the stealth so I get a closer shot?
Not interested in you anymore, Sue.
Well, I feel all right. A little discomfort, but you know, it's
This one.
not severe. But like I said, my arm is hurting. My shoulder is.
That looks like my.
Okay, and
A lot of pressure on it. It almost feels like it's being wrenched.
That's all. Who knows?
Let's get it back in the.
They'll put it back in the plasma.
Okay, we actually want to videotape you putting it in the sealed, sterile jar.
Okay.
Well, that will come later.
You got this?
Oh, okay.
We'll
Yes, I've got
get
it.
a solution, and then we're going to seal it. We're going to sign a document saying that it was sealed. Do we have a document, Greg?
No, we don't, but we'll have one shortly.
Dr. Lear, how do you think the procedure went?
I think the procedure went very well today.
Were you surprised with anything that you saw today?
I really didn't have any surprises other than the fact that the object that we removed looked very similar to the little cantaloupe seed-shaped things that we have removed in the past. Now, from time to time, there are individuals who get in touch with us because they may have objects or other pieces of physical evidence which are related to this phenomenon. And I am personally interested in any piece of physical evidence as long as it can be documented and has a legal quote-unquote chain of evidence behind it. I came across a case some years ago of a fireman at that time for the Bakersfield Fire Department who was an environmental specialist and arson specialist. So this man was a professional at collecting physical evidence. Now he had related a number of stories to us about his personal involvement with the abduction phenomena, seeing beings come into his room, having other family members also worked on by these beings, having some kind of relationship with both he, his wife, and his two children.
What kind of experiments or surgeries would he say these aliens are performing on him?
He doesn't know exactly what the procedures are. He sees them bring in equipment with them. Some of these marks that he has on his body are obviously injection type marks. They come in geometric patterns, triangles, circles, and so on. But when he gets one on one portion of the body, somebody else in the family will get one in the same place. Both he and his wife had, in one single night, had punctures on the side of the abdomen, and he woke up and he had the blood on his abdomen, blood on his nightshirt, and blood on the bed clothing. The wife woke up with exactly the same blood on her, and all she said was that she must have picked her skin or scratched an itch during the night. So she was, or has been, pretty much in denial up to the last 6 months, where she's becoming more and more convinced that there is something definitely going on. So he was extremely interested in documenting this, so he originally installed a video camera and a small clock radio in the bedroom and filmed hundreds and hundreds of hours of this stuff going on at night. Then he would sit again for many hundreds of hours and looking at the video, sometimes a frame at a time, until he was able to buy equipment to break his visual acuity down into even finer terms, and that looking at the field. So in looking at these, he was able to see, in certain instances, some kind of a being that came in through the wall of his clock. Another thing that he decided to do was to try and capture footprints of these individuals. So he used a towel, and on the undersurface of the towel he laminated a piece of tin foil, which he put down on the floor. Now the towel was the same color as the rug. So he put this down on the floor in front of the wall where he sees these individuals coming through. And in that way, he was able to get footprints, and he casted them. So we also have footprints of whatever it is came into this house. He figured that as long as he was successful in getting one set of footprints, then why not get more? So he put the towel down after that and got nothing. It was as if these individuals decided they weren't going to step on this towel anymore. One morning, however, he looked at the towel and he saw embedded into this towel a small black object. And he picked it up and looked closely at it, and he could see that it was a very strange looking nail or claw-like object, and it had 3 black hairs that were growing out of the back of it. He contacted me, and we sent the object to the head of zoology at the University of California, Berkeley, Dr. Ted Pappenfuss, who looked at this and in writing told us that he did not know where this came from. So we sent it in to a scientist friend of mine who looked at it and told us that the exterior covering of this object was vegetable. And I suggested perhaps, as we see with human fingernails, that this vegetable material was fungus, and he concurred with that. The second layer of material was keratin, and this is the same material that's found in human fingernails and toenails. And then there were deeper layers still. So we decided that the best thing to do at this point was to try and get DNA studies. And this required raising some funds, which we were successful with. And the object was sent to a world-famous geneticist who started the preliminary DNA research, and to date we have quite a bit of this that has come back, and so far the DNA indicates that it did not come from any kind of a creature of this earth. Now this DNA testing is a work in progress, and we hope sometime in the future to have a definitive answer.
Now, you said that it's also affecting the kids. Like, how is that happening, and what's exactly going on?
His son has had marks. He's also seen things inside the house. He's had marks on his chest, which look like injection marks or the impression of certain kind of instruments. And they both he and his young boy have noticed that there's a number of different strange computer phenomena that goes on along with the times that these visitors come into his home. The clock, for example, is continuously off, and also at times they've heard the computer keyboard operate where nobody was operating it, and operating it at a speed that certainly no human fingers could do. Well, there are numerous encounters between Gary himself and these alien beings. He's left notes for them. He's asked them questions. He claims that they've even taken him on a spacecraft. They showed him their home world. They've taken him back over the eastern seaboard of the United States, showed him the Statue of Liberty laying in the water, and Manhattan Island totally devastated by some kind of a disaster that occurred. They would not answer his questions as to what this was pertaining to, other than something that would happen in the future. But this is not unusual, because many other abductees have been shown catastrophic events, and many of them are on the eastern seaboard also. So the beings that he's seen that come into the room or initiate some kind of contact with him are seemingly interested in something either in his psychology or his physiology, and of course we don't know what exactly it is they're looking for or what exactly there is that's going on.
Quickly, what does he tell you they look like in appearance, and are they benevolent, or does he feel threatened?
In some instances, he feels that they are benevolent, but in most instances, his attitude is that they are there, they're doing a job, and they really have not that much interest in the individual human that they're doing it to. And they give very few answers to his questions, if any answers at all. As far as their appearance is concerned, he's seen a myriad of beings. He's seen even the typical large-eyed gray beings that are short. He's seen beings that look reptilian. He's seen beings that look more insect-like. It's quite a different variety. He also sees them bring a lot of what he calls apparatus into the house, boxes and paraphernalia and other instruments that he's described in detail. Also, he claims that they do various experiments on him right there in the bedroom without him going anywhere. Well, I've even taken photos and, oh my God, look at that. Jesus. Now I really see it. There's the other side of the face right here. Okay, this is a specimen that was given to me by a 32-year-old female who was having some kind of interaction with something while living in Italy. And she had an episode where she saw the bathtub she was in begin to fill up with some very strange, dark, particulate material. And she was horrified because she thought this material was some kind of poisoned or polluted water that was coming out of the tap. But then when she looked at the water, she didn't see any of these particles coming out. So the next question is, where is it coming from? So she thought the only other place was that it might be coming out of her, which was very, very scary again. She jumped out of the bathtub, and as she jumped out of the bathtub, she saw what she claimed was a little worm-like creature come to the top of the water and stick its head out. Now, I asked her over and over again, was it a worm? Was it a creature? Was it just a piece of particulate matter? She said she didn't really know, but that it added to the terror, and she reacted to it by taking a bottle of alcohol off of the sink and taking that alcohol and dumping it on top of this whatever it was that was sticking out of the water in the bathtub. When the alcohol, it had immediately sunk to the bottom of the tub, and she let the water out, and this went down the drain. She was absolutely horrified by this experience, didn't know what was going on, and then slowly began to change psychologically after this episode. She was instructed somehow mentally to save her urine, so she began to save jars of urine, and while urinating into a jar, she heard this swoosh, felt something come out of her that felt quite large, looked into the jar, and this was the object that she came out with. All in all, it's about, I would say, almost 2 inches in length. It's oval, it's greenish in color, and contains an area where there's a large amount of these gold little specks. Now, the only test that's been done on this object so far is by Digital Instrument Laboratories, again, in Santa Barbara, California, and the PhD who looked at this object with the atomic force microscope said that these little specks appear to be genuine gold. The individual that this happened to is now much calmer than she was when she returned from Italy. And in talking to her, I was able to find that she had seen bright lights in the sky. She also was telling me about footprints, little small footprints that were on the windows of her apartment in Italy. And when I asked what story she was on, she told me that she was on the 5th story. And I said, these prints, were they on the glass or in the glass? And she says, I really don't know, but they're still there. The question being, what does the future hold? I believe that the researchers in the field of ufology will continue on to investigate and to get as much information out as we can to the public. There are numerous books and videos that are certainly available today that were not available years ago. I now have a nonprofit 501c3 organization called the Aliens and Scalpel Research. And we can now get grants from various scientific and non-scientific sources, as well as private donations, to help carry on the research. And the purpose of this, of course, the net purpose, is to get the information out to the public. So that's, in a way, an or an intra, shall we say, UFO timetable. And then down the road, it looks like the pace of information that's allowed to go out to the public by governmental organizations seems to be picking up. There has been, for example, a 40% increase in sightings of objects flying through our skies within the last 90 days. Now, we don't know whether this has been a 40% increase in the amount of sightings or whether this has been a 40% increase in the amount of individuals who reported these sightings. But nevertheless, we're still hearing about them, and I feel that that may be a sign of future events. So I believe this is the greatest secret, that this is the greatest piece of information for the order of importance that affects mankind anywhere in the history of human beings on this planet. Here we now have a situation in which a person is alleging alien abduction, and then we find an object, either by X-ray, CAT scan, or MRI in their body. We take it out, we submit it for very stringent analysis at world-class laboratories, and they come and tell us that these contain non-terrestrial isotopic ratios. Then what is a logical person going to conclude? Nothing other than the fact that perhaps the person who alleges alien abduction is telling you the truth. I've been asked many times, where do you go from here? Well, what we do is continue to do more of the same. The more of these that are done, the more statistics we'll have, the more things we can learn. And perhaps some of these things can be of great benefit